Welcome. Today we're going to talk about the social emotional toolbox. So let me just get the screen set up. All right, I'm going to make myself go away. So let's get back to the beginning of this. There we go. All right. So this is an important topic with everything we've had going on lately, and just with kids being out of school, you know, with COVID and everything and the digital learning, you're going to have students coming back into your classroom with a lot of needs. Yes, there's going to be an academic gap that's going to happen, but there's also going to be that social emotional gap, because think about it, for the longest time, those kids only talk to the people inside their house. And we all know that every student has a story and that kind of thing. So here's some contact information if you want to reach out or have questions afterwards. And we'll start off with what is social emotional learning, because for the longest time, that was something that we, fell in the counselor's role. The counselors took care of all that, or the social worker, things like that, but it's really something every teacher needs to be aware of. So social emotional learning is just the process in which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So as you can see, that's going to hit everything from kindergarten all the way up through high school. So how this is set up, we're going to do some foundational stuff first, and then we're going to break down each of these areas and talk about what they are, and then just some ways that you can incorporate that into your classroom, hence the toolbox part of it. So this is a great screenshot, a great thing of what just some of the social emotional core competencies are. So and you know your students. You know, you may not know the students you're getting yet, you know, for next year, but you may know some of them. But you know the students in the makeup in your school, and you know if you have students that are struggling to work cooperatively in groups with others, maybe they're, they're not they struggle with self-efficacy. They cannot keep themselves working, self-motivation, self-control, stress management. Setting and achieving goals, time management during this digital learning phase was probably a struggle for a lot of students. So this is breaking it down so that way when we talk about it, you'll kind of see how the ideas go into each different thing. But why social emotional learning? These are two of my favorite things that have gone around Twitter. I don't want to call them memes because there's truth to them. This, because I ain't got a pencil. Think about this. Some of our kids have been working during this whole digital learning time. They were not only taking digital learning classes, but they had a job and were holding down and taking care of younger siblings and maintaining things. I mean, I know of a high school student, particularly, she was responsible for the education of her 4 younger siblings, plus trying to help mom and dad out with getting a job. That's a lot of pressure. And then this one right here, can someone help me with these? I'm late for math class. Yes, teaching our academics are important. Yes, that's the way these kids are going to get out of these situations. But we've got to think about this too, and that's where this comes into here. I know you've heard it before. You can't do the Bloom stuff until you take care of the Maslow stuff. And it's not just a counselor problem anymore. It's got to be something that all educators are looking at, because these are all our kids. So getting a better grip on, kind of seeing what that is, the physiological, the safety, love and belonging. This was huge during that digital learning time, doing those Zoom meets and the Google meets and making sure the kids knew that they were included and loved and that you were checking in on them. This had to happen before you could get into that academic stuff. So this is just something to think about. And, I do say you need to work with your administration and counselors and things like that in order to reach out for resources in order to help do this, because you can't do it alone. This is not something you can do alone. It takes a team to help the students, and you've got to work with each other on that. So, but everybody's going to be on the same page. So behavior. Every behavior has a reason. Behavior is communication. And so many times it's hard to look at it that way because that behavior is disrupting your academics, and we're held to such a high standard for teaching and test scores and things like that. But if you can take a minute or have maybe a collaborative teacher that can step in and try to find out what of this is causing this. This is what we see in the behavior. This is what's going on after that. Every behavior has a reason. Every behavior has a reason. Get to know the student, and a lot of this will fall into place. And maybe that's not a strength for you. Well, team teach and find somebody that it is with, okay? Maybe if you're in a partner in a family of 3 teachers, or maybe you're high school or something, maybe there's somebody else that you can, if that kid's having struggle in class, find another teacher they have and kind of ask, and maybe that teacher can help you see what's going on, that kind of thing and stuff. So this just kind of takes, admitting to your colleagues and going, hey, can we help this kid together? Because it is a team approach. So the first competency of social emotional learning we're going to look at is self-awareness. That's knowing your strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. We've heard a lot about growth mindset lately, but do we really understand what it means by that? And it's not, we're not just listening to it as, putting it in the same category of fidelity and PLCs and things like that, but really understanding what that is. But self-awareness is identifying emotions, accurate self-perception, recognizing strengths, self-confidence, and self-efficacy. This is a struggle, and we'll look at it, that self-confidence and recognizing strength, that's a big thing in that middle school age, because that's when the kids start questioning who they are. They're not sure why they, they question their looks. They're not sure what to do. They have to start thinking about high school things and what group they're going to fit in. They have to start thinking about careers possibly and that kind of thing. But I love this image for the growth mindset. So this is what a fixed mindset is. Instead, if you've got that kid that's just like, I'm not good at this, try to help them to rewire their thinking and using their words. What am I missing? I made a mistake, helping them to see that mistakes help them to learn better. It's good enough. Think about that with that middle school student especially. Well, that's good enough. I can just turn that in. But is it really your best work? And helping them to see that doing their best work is what they really should aim for. It's not about the grade. It's about giving it all you can. So that's just something to kind of those are conversations to have. Your students, your classroom, and their school makeup. So you can kind of see how you can word that in. Maybe it's a bulletin board to start off with. School's going to look different next year. I know that. We all know that. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but we've got to go in with the mindset of we're still there to make a difference and still there to be the change for those students. Then this I am feeling, and this is something where a lot of kids understand anger and they understand happy, but and this one doesn't show it, but maybe the discouraged or frustrated, things like that, they can't articulate those words sometimes. And so having those I'm feeling posters available where they can be able to show, well, maybe they can't tell you the word, but they can point to it and kind of helping them to work through and seeing what they feel like. Maybe it's disgust. Maybe they're upset about something that happened at home and this is what's happening in your classroom because of this that happened at home. Giving them time to talk and validating, hey, I'm sorry you feel that way, but can we make I can't fix that for you, but let's try to have a good day. Making sure that they know, hey, you hurt them, but you need them to still do this. There's so many different ones of these out and available. Teacher Pay Teachers has different ones, different kinds of things for high school students, especially your high school students that maybe have exceptionalities, maybe having just some of those, going through that in a social story or a video, where they can understand it to kind of get to where they start talking about it. Because here's the deal, you don't want to know that a kid's at this level when they throw the desk across the classroom. You'd rather them kind of come in and say, hey, I'm upset about something, and give you a chance to talk through it. Just some more things, positive self-talk, self-awareness worksheet. This is something that, if this is not modeled at home, It's something that we have to teach at school. And I know we're not the parents, but y'all, let's face it, we have these kids. Um, when traditional school is in setting, we are with these students more than when they're awake, more than their parents are. So we have to be that model for them. So teaching them how to talk positive about themselves. Because maybe they don't get that at home. So that's something that can be modeled just in the classroom and with cooperative grouping and things like that. That is something to set up in if you do groups. And I don't know how, groups are going to go in this new year, but that's something that you can set up as one of your parameters with your group, that we will be positive with each other. If you have an issue, come talk to the adult in the classroom about it. And that's something to kind of think about. This self-awareness worksheet, I remember a couple of years ago, I asked the students, what is something you're good at? And I used the word strength, and they struggled with that word strength. So getting them to start to see, especially in that 4th through 7th, 8th grade area of maybe even 3rd through 8th grade, what am I strong at? What are the things I do well? What are the things I don't do well? And helping them to kind of see that everybody has strengths and weaknesses and how to kind of work through it. Maybe that's something you can, read a book on or find a hobby or something to do. Helping the kids in that younger age even to start finding those things that they do well. That positive self-talk. And this is something that you can do. This looks, I know, elementary this way, but think about even in a middle school, high school setting with Post-it notes, or maybe I remember before we used to, and this is saying it, but everybody put their name on a sheet of paper and you would go around in different, like almost in a, thing, and you could even pass the papers in the classroom, but you're writing something positive, each person is, about that person on that paper, and that's something that that person can keep later. You have to set parameters up. You have to make sure that your students know it has to be positive, it has to be something nice, that kind of thing. But that's still something that you could do, because I guarantee you that could be something they may not remember anything else about your sophomore history class, but they'll remember that piece of paper and what their classmates thought about them. So and maybe it's not that you do that with your whole class. Maybe you put them in and have the girls all share with each other, or do it in small groups or that kind of stuff. But that's just something that you can kind of those are things that can be done in every grade level kind of thing, and start to look at that positive self-talk. Because maybe a classmate can see something in somebody else that they couldn't see in themselves. So it's a relationship building thing to do. The next one to look at is self-management. That's effectively managing stress, controlling impulses, and motivating yourself to set and achieve goals. This is another huge one, because and we all know this as educators, if they aren't self-disciplined or self-motivated, they have a hard time being organized or getting goals done, setting goals. And the impulse control is hard for a lot of our students, especially the ones on the spectrum and the ones that struggle with exceptionality issues, because they'll do it and then all of a sudden go, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. So working on thinking before doing is huge. So these are just a couple of good graphics that I thought were key to helping interventions for students who struggle with planning. And this is something, I would share these with, your teachers and at your school and everything. Pathway to Success is a great website, by the way, with tons of different things. So helping them to get organized with things. When we were in school, when I was in school, we had to have the binders and you had to have the planners and that kind of stuff. Kids today have a great advantage because technology has so many apps to help them keep organized with things. So if you have that access to it, and that's something, maybe sitting down with that student and showing them how to put things in their Google Calendar, helping with Google Keep and things like that that they can do. I remember a student, had him a couple of years ago, but he had one of those weird schedules, because the parents were divorced, but he had it in his calendar about whose house he was going to be at, because it helped him to know, when he was going to the next one and that kind of thing, and helped with transition. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. And the more you get to know your students, the more they get with that on there. Like this one I thought was big, making to-do lists before starting the work, helping them to kind of see what the pieces of the assignment may be. And that's something, especially like, as an instructional coach or collaborative teachers and people working with other students, that can kind of help those scaffold that instruction as well. Here's some with organization, and then executive functioning strategies that every teacher can use. These are just good best practices. You know, so many times what we used to do for a couple of students really now is good for every student. You know, having a daily schedule posted, writing the homework in the same spot, explicitly state when important information is shared. In other words, hey, this may be something you want to make sure you highlight. That's just something that's good for all kids. So these are great just to kind of think about, especially as you start to get to know your students through the thing. And these are just good things to share with. Maybe you have a collaborative teacher coming in your classroom, and they may, or maybe a first year teacher at your school, and these are just some good ways you can share with them too of how to help their students. So some more self-management. Let's look at this one first. This is any age activity, under control activity. So this is something you have to, it's working on that impulse. So let's look right here. You've got to read the word, but here's the thing. When you first look at that word blue, what does your mind say? Your mind didn't say blue, your mind said red. So you're having to slow your brain down and stop and think about it, because each of these words are different. You know, yes, they can read the word, but their mind is saying that says gray. No, it's pink. So kind of slowing down to think about what that is. And that's just kind of giving that student that practice, maybe that student that gets so frustrated at something going on in the classroom or themselves, getting them to take a minute and stop and think and stop and take a minute. Because once you stop and think about it, you're like, okay, this is what I can do. They realize what they can do to fix it. Going over the zones of regulation. You can do this in every classroom in different ways. This is kind of set up with some picture symbols, but helping the kids to see when they're at the blue, green, yellow, red levels and stuff, and getting them to see what those levels are. Because especially with the blue and the yellow, kids don't always recognize that. And you've got some kids that can go from blue to red like that. So you don't want them to do that. You want them to start to be able to recognize it. You know, I mean, I've done even before in the times 1 to 10. You know, hey, where are you at if on scale to 1 to 10? And if they're above a 5, then we need to kind of do some of this stuff down here to get back where we're supposed to be at. So that's just something to kind of think about as well. You can fix this for once you get to know your students. You could set up something like this that customizes for them. So in other words, if you had a student who struggled with this, then I would even have them maybe up to, like, depending on the age and the student, their picture, have them draw the faces or take pictures of them making these different faces. So you're kind of setting it up, personalizing. And then what do these tools to get to the green zone work for them? Because not every kid needs to take, taking deep breaths does not work for everybody. Counting to 10 does not work for everybody. You know, so finding out what works for them and making that to where they have just a couple to look at all of a sudden to do. And there's, we'll look at some of these again too, another template that I found off Teacher Pay Teachers that you can look at too that will help for that. Setting up another self-management is setting up some SMART goals. This was something that when I did a counseling class year before last with students and tried to set it up and look at these periodically throughout the time, they're great at doing the I will do this by this. But trying to figure out how they're going to reach that goal took some more thinking through that and stuff. And then getting them to reach on this time bound, you know, that I will reach my goal by, and making sure they're setting realistic goals. And that's just something to, you know, good with life. I mean, if you're setting up the beginning of the year and you know, some of the students were like, I'm going to meet my AR goal every 9 weeks. Which, if you're a good reader and that's something you're motivated to do anyway, that's probably a good goal. If you've never met your AR goal, that might be a lofty goal. So kind of getting them to talk through what that is and going through what exactly has to happen for that goal to be met. And that's good just to kind of get them to start thinking about that as they get ready to get to college and stuff. So then they're looking at the end goal of, well, I just want to make money. Well, how are you going to make money? What kind of, you know, what are we going to work towards in order to be able to make money? Because a lot of times the kids will go, well, I just want to make money one day. How? When you have to talk through the process. Well, I just want to go to college. I want to play sports. Okay. How is that? In getting them to have those conversations. And I think you could even do SMART goals with your kindergarten and first grade group. I would keep them simple, you know, I'm going to be nice to my, something like that, but getting them to just to set goals, and maybe you could even do it as a class to start to come model through how to do with that. The biggest thing is once you set the goals though, going back and looking at them periodically throughout the time and kind of getting them to monitor progress and things like that. So that way you're not, you know, it's kind of like, you know, our New Year's resolutions in January. You don't want to set, then you got to kind of look at them. And granted, this year, I think everybody's resolutions are, you know, out the window on some of it, but step back and have a look at them again and go, oh, okay, well, those are my goals. Let me see where I'm at with some of that. Because if you just write them in January and you don't look at them ever again, then what good are they doing? So you got to kind of keep revisiting them. More self-management coping tools. This is something I found off Teacher Pay Teacher. If you'll email me, I can send you the author to look for. But getting them to what helps me. This is something those first few days of school, and it has this whole kit has a list of this without the picture, so it would work for another, you know, another student. But getting them to look through some of these and tell you what works for them. So that, because here's the deal, if they're in a frustrating moment and they're upset, that's not the time to find out what coping tools they need in their toolbox. So you've got to do this pre-work during that relationship building in those first few weeks of school. So that way when something does happen, you know how to help and be that support for them. This is something just to think with younger kids, bubbles are huge, you know, as a relaxing thing because it takes time to put the thing in the bubble and blow it out, and that's showing self-control. This is an article thinking about organizing your classroom for students, and we're going to make available when this series is over these presentations in a bundle for you, and I'll show you where to get them at the end of the super teacher thing at the end of June. So don't stress about wondering why you don't have a link yet. So the next one, social awareness, and you can see some of the pictures I know in the thing that you're looking at later, but you'll also have the clickable links at the end of the webinar series. Social awareness, perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, respect for others. So something, just walk in my shoes, self-reflection activity. There are different books you can look at. There are different things to do. This is big right now as you have kids, you know, transitioning from everything that's going on in our world and stuff. So this may be kind of how you have to, this may be the competency to start the year off with, kind of looking at walking in shoes, getting them to appreciate the differences in each other on it and stuff, and looking at perspectives. This is a free social skills lesson on perspective taking. It kind of gives them the picture things where if you look at the woman, you know, it has that woman's face and you can see it one way, see it another way. Kind of going over what empathy is, because a lot of times kids have heard what sympathy is, but they've not always heard what empathy is. And just getting them to see that empathy is, you know, if you were walking in that person's shoes, what would it be like? Here's a couple of other things. This is yes, it's Sesame Street, but Sesame Street's got a couple of videos out now talking about what's going on in our world. And so that may be a good tool just to use to explain, or to provide for parents to explain. You know your school, you know your community, you know how you need to set it up in your classroom and stuff. Teaching diversity, crafts and activities. Make sure if you're doing this kind of stuff, regardless of what grade it is, that you have craft and activities that represent your population in your classroom. In other words, make the colors available, make the construction paper. And yes, I know that's something that teachers are going to have to purchase, but I think it's important to, and it shows that student that you care about them and you're, you want them to make, you know, to feel included. So it's just a little thing I think we can all do right now to make sure that we are socially aware. Another thing is finding things in common. Have those conversations. Regardless of what age the classroom is, you can have the conversations, maybe even in small groups, of finding the things you have in common with other people. So that way you start to look at, you know, maybe it's you both like football, and you can kind of start to see that that's something you can have in a friend, and getting them to see, you know, socially aware, and just kind of looking at, you know, what a friend means even, and that you can have different levels of friends. And that's something huge in that 4th, 5th, 6th grade age range, where they have to realize friends don't always, you don't have to have like 50 million best friends. You can be a friend and not do things with, you know, not sit with them at lunch every day, or not, you know, go to each other's houses and stuff. That you can be a friend and just be not, or you can kind and stuff. So, but getting them to see what they have in common with other people. Here's another thing too, is looking at what does respect look like? And that's something that goes back to, you know, if it's not taught at home, we've got to model it in the school. So getting them to, you know, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and that's a conversation to have. The toothpaste thing is huge. And that depending on how your class is, and I would wait a couple days before I did it. But once you get to know your kids, and it's just an activity of squeezing out the toothpaste and realizing that, you know, you can't put that toothpaste back in that tube. And that's kind of how your words are and stuff. So we've got to think before we say words and respect each other. Because you can squeeze it all out, but it makes a mess and it can't be put back in the tube once it's done. Another one, relationship skills, which look at relationship building, teamwork, social engagement, communication. So make different team building activities, and these are things that, you know, we always try to do, I think, at the first couple of weeks of school anyway, relationship building and things like that. These are just some ideas. Again, you know, the year's going to look different this year. It may be that you have to do some of these digital, you know, and putting it out there and stuff, but there are ways you can change some of this and make it to where they're starting to build relationship skills in a small group. Google has several different collaboration tools and ways that you can do with that we've mentioned in some of our other webinars. Getting them to do just different games and stuff. Once we know, you know, what we can do, social distance and stuff, getting things, interacting with that and still getting those relationships building and getting them to interact back with a person again, I think is going to be big, even if it starts with conversation. Jack Hartman for you younger grades has several videos out on greeting someone without touching and what 6 feet space is and that kind of stuff. So that may be something you want to kind of start your year with and pull up in the classroom. Responsible decision making, identifying problems, analyzing situations, evaluating, reflecting. So just problem solving, problem solving, problem solving, problem solving. This is a life skill for our kids. And so helping them to see, okay, I have a problem, and not run into the teacher every minute, but figuring out what they can do to fix it. And that starts with in kindergarten age even, you know, starting them to start to show them what they can do, but then, you know, not rushing in and fixing it every time, but helping to kind of, you know, fix it from a distance and that kind of thing. And you know which problems to intervene with quickly and which ones that you can kind of let the kids work out a little bit first. So laying down those laws. And here's the thing, role play. You know, and that's something even, you know, making skits and stuff, and that's something you can integrate with a Flipgrid video, or they can do an Adobe Spark graphic or something, especially for high school students, just to show how they can solve a problem if they need to. You know, it's spend that first week of school getting to know your kids. It may even be that you have to spend the first week, you know, like not just the 3 days, but a little bit longer. Get to know them, because then you're laying that foundation of we're a family and you've got that respect coming. STEM and social emotional learning are huge. There's some connections there and you can see how they relate with each other, but that's that integrating component of academic success, because you're doing the problem solving, you're role playing, you're interacting with other people in decision making on that. Brooke Brown has several different things on Teacher Pay Teachers, from calm down construction kits and different things you can do with STEM, and she's even created paperless STEM bins now that you can look at. So if you've got Chromebooks and technology access, that is something to kind of take a look at it, because it gets in that problem solving and decision making and components of social emotional learning, but also hitting the science, technology, engineering, and math and stuff like that. So for that, think about that group that you have that maybe finishes quickly for things. That's something to kind of take a look at with. Trauma-informed school. This is where getting everybody on the same page and realizing that we've got kids who are coming to school with a lot of stuff, and we've got to quit harping on them that they don't have a pencil or may not, you know, have what they need, and seeing what we can do to help with them and stuff, because some kids have seen some pretty rough stuff as they, you know, and they're still trying to make the best of it and stuff. So just being aware of things, being, you know, maybe if you've got a student that's had a death or a loss of a loved one, finding out when that anniversary day is. Because if the student's in the class that day, that may be a hard day for them. So making sure that you kind of like, I had a student a couple years ago who he loved chocolate covered donuts, and this was when we could still, bring in a snack or something. But on his brother's anniversary for the first 2 years, I brought him a donut that day. And he, just that little something that kind of said, hey, it's going to be okay. But sometimes it takes the teacher recognizing that kind of stuff. And I've been, I could relate to where he was. And so that kind of helps me to be some empathy towards it. But, and like I said, if you can't relate that, find a teacher that can and maybe kind of pair them up, or put yourself in that, student's shoes and try to see what you can do. But just being mindful, that's just something to kind of do. Just another way we can help our students. Just some more of trauma-informed school. Maybe you don't know what it is, but this is something you need to get the whole school on board with. So kind of talking through some of that and kind of looking at some of that background. It's more than positive behavior. It's being trauma sensitive. It's kind of going, okay, that kid's got a story. What can we do to help that kid be all that they can be? What can we do to help that kid get past that story to where they realize that story they came in with was just a chapter. It's not the end of the book. Compassion fatigue and secondary trauma. I'm going to hang out here for a second. Teachers deal with more than I think anybody realizes. We hear stories that would, break our hearts. We hear stories that make us sick. And it's secondary trauma. It's a real thing. It's out there. And a lot of times you've got to know the difference. Like I love this cartoon right here. I'm afraid you simply care too much. You have compassion fatigue. But you've got to make sure to take care of yourself too. Because here's the thing, and it goes back to the oxygen mask. On an airplane, you can't help your kids if you don't, take care of you and pour into you and stuff. And I remember I hit a point last year, towards the end of the 2 years ago, where I thought I was burnt out. I was looking for jobs outside of education. Well, then I went to a workshop and learned what compassion fatigue was and realized I was just tired. I was worn out and fatigued from caring too much about things that were going on with the students and that kind of stuff. And that's where you have to put the boundary line in. Yes, we care about our students. We want to do all that we can do to help them. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we keep ourselves and take care of ourselves as well. And y'all, it's going to be a rough school year. We already know it's going to be different. So doing all we can this summer to increase our professional learning, increase our personal learning, get those self-care things in line will help us even more in the school year. I think oops, that link is not there anymore, so we'll go back and fix that one later. So back here, putting on your own oxygen mask before helping those around you. Our children are our garden. They absorb our stress just as they absorb our peace. They absorb our negativity just as they absorb our joy, and we have the power to control what they absorb. But first, we must tend to ourselves. So it's okay to take care of yourself and to take time for that. Love your kids, love where your stuff's there, but love your kids at home too. Love that part of your life that's outside of the job as well. Make sure to keep them in balance. Balance Like a Pirate is a great book that just kind of talks about, the professional learning and the personal learning and having things to do in each of those areas, which I know has been hard even during this time for teachers because we're so social and want to connect with each other as well. Social stories are a great way to kind of help students who may not know what's going on to know what's going on. And you can write your own if you need to. You don't have to, find one out there and stuff. Maybe you just need to do, stuff, but it's that kid who is lacking some of that social interaction. And this could be all the way up through high school. Like I said, once you get to know your students and stuff, so sometimes you may just need a social story of what to do when they're frustrated. And replacing the pictures here with appropriate graphics for your student. Maybe it's getting the kid to help, using that technology and that kid to create a Google slide or a Flipgrid or something. One thing I did a couple of years ago too, with some students is I helped them to work on self-advocacy. So by the end of the year, I had a student who recorded a Flipgrid that we were able to share later, but he told in there about he gets angry sometimes and this is what helps him when he's angry. So that's a social story in a vocal time for him, but he's able to articulate it at that point. And so there are just different ways you can do that. If you have questions about that later, you can always message me or interact, and we can kind of go over some ideas for that. Coping strategies, giving them things to do when they get upset. This is a good one. Using shapes to teach deep breathing. You can print these out and put these in notebooks so the kids just literally follow it. Go, breathe out, breathe in, hold. And there's different shapes and different things like that. Getting them, just thinking about a coping toolbox and what are some things that are needed for that. And that goes back to what we talked about before. It's different for every kid. So getting to know your kids that are going to need one of these and kind of getting where you can have those ready. Maybe it's working with the counselor or the social worker or the collaborative teacher before that, so that way they have that, you know what to do when the situation comes up in class. PBIS World, if you've never played with this website, take a look at it. I'm gonna click on it real quick. It basically has all of these different behavior things. Let's go with frustration. So this kind of tells you what the student's going to look like. Does that describe the student? Yes, it does. Now you got Tier 1 interventions. Hello, RTI, helping students. Oh, I've tried all that. Take me to Tier 2. Now it gives you Tier 2 things to do it. And you're looking at those going, okay, well, that's good. But what does that mean? Well, we just talked about social stories. Let's click on it. Looky there. How do I do it? And then resources to support it. And they have that for everyone on there. So that's a great website to keep up with. Here are some more coping strategy things to think about. And this is something, you know, kids have had to have different coping strategies when we've gone through this digital learning phase and then the summertime with everything that's going on. So being mindful of what coping strategies, maybe what works for you in modeling, maybe if the breathing or that kind of stuff, or having kids talk about it if it's appropriate to share some different things, making it available, fidgets available or bubbles, or what's appropriate for your school setting in your classroom. Breathing exercises, labeling the feeling, positive self-talk, all of those are different things that you can work on at any age to kind of get them to do. Maybe it's reading, reading gives them a time to zone out. A lot of kids are good with drawing. A lot of kids, they get so frustrated that they can't get the words out, but I've been able to before to go, hey, draw me a picture then of what's going on, and you can get that picture out. So maybe making sure that kid has a notebook or paper to where if they're frustrated, they can at least get that picture out, because a lot of times if you can get it out of their head, whether it's writing or drawing, then they're not thinking about it anymore. Cone of learning, and just remembering what we do with hands-on learning, that so much of the social emotional is hands-on. It's looking at it, we remember 90% of what we say and do. So making sure that you take a multi-sensory approach to when you're doing this. You're not just like going, okay, today we're gonna work on relationships, but giving them time to practice, giving them time to interact with others, even if it's 6 feet apart. These are just some more ways some things to interact with. Social emotional learning is on Twitter. It's big on that. There's stuff on Pinterest. Teacher Pay Teachers. Counselor Carrie is a huge person that I follow and find different things on as well there. But look at the hashtag with social emotional out on Twitter world. They post a lot of different things. I follow the social emotional learning in the SEL in schools just to kind of keep up with what other people are talking about. And sometimes some of the new research and stuff is shared there as well. These are some of my favorite books. I have a link on my live binder for all the books I have, but these are probably my favorite if I had to pick the top 5. Enemy Pie. This kid basically thought that kid was an enemy, and his dad worked him through about getting to know his friend, and all of a sudden he wasn't an enemy anymore. This is more of an older book on bullying, and it relates into social media. So this would be good. And I mean, you could read books even in middle school with kids. And so this is kind of more that probably 5th grade and up when you get to that. This is good for digital citizenship and digital footprint skills all the way around, because you talk about how to have strong passwords, how to be mindful of what you post on technology, how you treat other people. Huge. Invisible Boy, talking about self-awareness and looking at strengths and strengths of others and how to include them. And I love the artwork in this because it starts off where the boy is drawn in pencil type, and then eventually as he starts to fit in and people start to notice him more, the color comes to him. Peter Reynolds say something, talking about having a voice and that everybody's voice matters. This is a good book for everything that's going on right now, just to kind of remind your students that they do have a voice. Here's some more read alouds that you can look at on Pathway to Success. These are some books for teachers, the trauma-informed strategies. This is a great little thing right here to look at. And this is something too to think about when you have foster care children, that more than likely, if you've got a kid that's in foster care, that there are some trauma-informed things that you need to do and kind of keep aware about. You may not get to know the whole story, but they're going to come to you with different things on there. Maslow Before Bloom is a new book that Dr. Perlman has out that's very good, and it's just an easy read. This Therapeutic Parenting Strategies and Solutions is basically you look at behavior, kind of like that PBIS world, and it has strategies and stuff on there. The hand model of the brain, and this is research that we could probably spend a whole webinar on, but when you think about the student's brain and you're looking at what happens when we flip our lid, when we understand what's really going on, it helps us to understand the behavior that we're seeing. So if we can get it to the point where they don't flip it, where we can keep it where their brain's working in harmony right here, before this happens, then we don't, we're not dealing with the bad feelings, and the amygdala is still staying under thing. And a lot of the trauma-informed research said, sometimes food is a thing to keep it from going from here to here. So your students, kind of what's allowed at your school and what's not allowed at your school. But look at some of this brain research some days. It really was interesting the more you started to realize that, because every kid that comes with trauma into your classroom, it takes a lot longer and it's a lot harder to keep them here where they live like in this most day. They live in that fight or flight mode because of everything they've gone through. And that kind of helps us to understand why you see the fidgeting or the impulse control and different struggles there. Just looking at this again, I loved this graphic on trauma and then ADHD, and here's the overlap. And that's just something to think about too, because so many times we label the kid here, oh, well, they just have that, but they may have some of this too. And this is what you're going to see in the middle kind of thing. So just kind of getting to know the stories of the kids and helping them just to get their strategies. All kids are our kids. Hurt people, 10 deep breaths. This is not about me. Getting them to know what they can say to themselves when they start to get upset. This is a website that had some anti-racism resources for educators that from a trauma-informed aspect as well. This is just some more resources. Vocabulary has tons of videos on social emotional learning. These are some links for middle school and high school resources to look at. Newzella has a social emotional learning collection, but you have to pay for to get that part. STEM bins at home, that's that paperless STEM bins, and Britt Brown's website that I was talking about to kind of help you do that cooperative grouping and that problem solving part of it if you can't do all the interaction like you used to. Some more background things. Calming apps, visual timer apps, have them on your phone. If you're a collaborative teacher, have one of the stop, breathe, and think apps on your phone. Visual timer apps are usually free a couple times a year, especially April during Autism Month, and they may be free again later. I want to say maybe October. So kind of keep a watch on that. That always helps. I know we looked at a classroom screen on last week's webinar. That could be something that you could put up there as well for the timer, because helping the kids to know, a lot of kids don't know what 5 minutes looks like. And let's face it, most of the clocks in our classrooms are analog, and kids today struggle to tell time. So if you tell them, hey, you've got 5 minutes, well, they don't know what 5 minutes feels like. So you've got to give them a timer. You've got to give them that resource to know what 5 minutes it looks, is that. So some more EdSurge did a lot of articles last year on just some more social emotional learning and kind of how to foster it. These are good for that background knowledge and that foundational knowledge if you're going into the school and you're the only one that's even heard about social emotional. I want to end right this. So I'm a Pooh Bear fan, but promise me you'll always remember that you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And that's what we want our kids to remember. So regardless, because here's the thing, y'all, regardless of what academics they learn in the classroom, regardless of their grades in school, We want them to know that they're braver than they believe they are, they're stronger than they seem, and they're smarter than they think, because that's what's going to take them into college and beyond. That's what's going to take them into this world and help them to be the best citizens that they can be. That's what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to be that ripple effect that's going to change our nation. And who knows, you could have somebody in your your class this coming year that's the world changer. You have somebody in your classroom that's going to be the person that finds the cure for some disease that we don't even know about yet, the one that's going to invent um, something amazing, the one that's going to help the space rocket, the space, thing continue to grow. You don't know who's in your classroom and what the plans that they have and that they're going to be able to do one day. So help them to see and be the best that they can be. This kind of sums up what social emotional learning is, because it's helping the students to work on those skills that may not always be found in a textbook, but are going to be those skills that are going to get them through life. So thank y'all for coming today, and we'll take questions.